rock and roll is as deeply ingrained into the southern United States as Douglas fir trees are entrenched into the Pacific Northwest. Telling the story of rock without mentioning the South would be akin to trying to detail the history of films without ever uttering the three syllables of Hollywood. Starting in the 1950s, Hollywood Southern figures the world still remembers: Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Little Richard, and others, gave birth to this rebellion form of music that would induce a stranglehold on the nation's percolating youth culture. Thanks to their larger-than-life bravado and scintillating musical talent, Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley mixed rock star swagger with country roots to a sweet tea during the 1960s. By the time we got to the classic rock era of the 1970s, Lynyrd Skynyrd and the Allman Brothers took the mantle to proudly share their Southern heritage with music fans from sea to shining sea. And smack dab in the middle of Ronald Reagan's America, Tom Petty wanted to remind the world that even though he had moved to California in the mid-1970s to pursue a music career, he was born a rebel in Gainesville, Florida, who grew up with a Southern accent. Thomas Earl Petty, the namesake of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, was like former MLB great Pete Rose, addicted to hits and singles. He had an incredible songwriting capability, as he crafted compelling characters with ease. Petty also had a knack of concocting relatable material that can apply to people in all walks of life. His voice could be as calming as waves hitting a shoreline and as bright as a pinball machine. He is one of the great singer-songwriters America has ever had the pleasure of calling their own. Riding shotgun for Petty's entire career was riff connoisseur Mike Campbell. When you crack open the bottomless treasure trove of memorable Petty songs, Campbell's fingerprints are all over the material. And thank God for that. Imagine Petty incubating all these amazing songs without those iconic slides and solos to breathe life into them. A painstakingly underrated guitar player, and the man responsible for an endless barrage of rock fan smiles. The other heartbreaker along for the entirety of the ride was Benmont Tench. His job was to rock the hell out of the piano, organ, keyboards, synthesizers, and sprinkle in some backing vocals for good measure. The piano and keyboards woven throughout these incredible tracks give key elements of fun and emotion. After replacing original bassist Ron Blair in 1982, Howie Epstein became an integral part of the Heartbreakers dynamic, not only by keeping that smooth bass thumping, but adding those emotive backing harmonies as well. Epstein's voice offers Petty critical support and layers with his decadent vocal contribution. And rounding out Petty's important cast of musicians was Stan Lynch, the man behind the kit. His formidable and diverse drumming style allowed the band to infiltrate different areas of music territory, while still always sounding like the Heartbreakers. Lynch had a great grasp on the band's musical vision and understood how to build the foundation for the group's sound. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers burst onto the scene with their stupendous self-titled debut album with Geffen Records in 1976. I mean, can you imagine putting Breakdown and American Girl on a rookie rock record? Petty and Company proved that they did not understand the concept of a sophomore slump when they put out You're Gonna Get It in May of 1978. That album includes tracks such as I Need to Know and Listen to Your Heart. Perhaps you've heard of them. The group then closed out the 70s by starting off Damn the Torpedoes with Refugee and Here Comes My Girl. What a fucking way to kick off a rock record. Petty and the Boys' first effort of the 1980s started off again really strong, as 1981's Hard Promises opening track makes a really key observation. The waiting really is the hardest part. The next year, the band dove into the idea of chance for Long After Dark's melancholic hit, You Got Lucky. The sixth installment of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers was released in March of 1985. Southern Accents is Petty coming to grips with his Southern heritage. The album dives into the complexities that arise when sharing the pride you have in your homeland with outsiders who may not always appreciate your culture. Hello, I am Chad Jones, and welcome to Don't Scratch the Vinyl, a music podcast where myself, and occasionally a guest, break down an iconic album in its entirety. This show both lays out the historical significance of the record and what music fans can take from the compilation today. I recorded this episode at Big Net Media's studio in Boston, Massachusetts. If I would call up any of my three brothers right now and ask them which artist our mother played the most growing up for us, it would not take them long to utter the name Tom Petty. I was ingratiated with him at a very, very young age. The tracks of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' greatest hits sounds like the names of old friends from childhood. American Girl, Listen to Her Heart, Refugee, Free Fallin'. The list really does go on and on. I always found his You, I, Me songs so relatable. I Won't Back Down never failed to give me a confidence, adrenaline boost. Whereas even as a young boy, I yearned for the days that I could make some beauty swoon by quoting back, "She looks so right, she is all I need tonight," from Here Comes My Girl. Petty's cinematic writing style also hooked me into his characters as well as his storytelling. The story of Eddie, his tattoo, the chains jingling on his leather jacket from Into the Great Wide Open, had me fascinated. Not to mention this brand new terminology that I had never heard of before, like an A&R man, a single. They left me very much intrigued. I mean, the man penned Mary Jane's Last Dance. While I did not know as a 7-year-old, the song had obvious drug connections. Images of Mary Jane in her party dress danced through my head nonetheless. Growing up, I was very familiar with Petty's impressive hits smorgasbord. I routinely heard his voice through my headphones and speakers. But as I grew up and became interested in appreciating the differences and reincarnations of musicians, a thought occurred to me regarding Petty. I really did not have a great grasp on the intricacies of his career. I like to think I have a decent understanding of the different musical aspects, subgenres, and movements that occurred during the prime of his career. After all, the man burst onto the scene in 1976, when classic rock was forming as a concept, and put out Wild Flowers in 1994, when alternative aesthetics had the genre ablaze. But Tom Petty's greatest hits run so smooth together because, well, he always sounded like Tom Petty. I am not sure even a rock fan pretty tapped in would be able to answer confidently which songs were on which record and which year they all came out. Or even would they be confidently able to answer, was that track from Petty's solo career or with the Heartbreakers? And that is honestly the beauty of his career as a musician. The rock world bounced from Led Zeppelin to AC/DC to Van Halen to Guns N' Roses to Nirvana to Green Day. And throughout all those transitions, Petty kept pumping out quality material for fans who got addicted to the genre for all kinds of different reasons. I pride myself on being able to give a decent guess when, or remember the year, a rock song came out. But when it comes to Tom Petty, to me, he just sounds like the last quarter of the 20th century. And so going through his first 6 albums, all with the Heartbreakers, he was not solo until 1989, I try to take note of what made those specific records stand out from each other, especially when it came to Southern accents. And so what I took away from this record specifically, which was released in March 26th of 1985, was that this collection of songs was the closest I will get to having a sit-down conversation with Tom Petty. Southern Accents kicks off with Rebels. And you get a very soothing musical opening for this one, as it sounds very positive and uplifting. Not necessarily how you would think a rock song titled Rebels would start. But the first line of, "Honey, don't walk out, I'm too drunk to follow," that is definitely apropos for this song title. Now you can hear the Bob Dylan influence throughout many of Petty's songs. Whether it's his singing, his songwriting, but you can really hear the influence on this record, especially on this line, maybe a little rough around the edges, or, as you can hear some Dylan-esque vocals with how he pronounces or, as he more says it, maybe a little rough around the edges, as Dylan oftentimes would drop the O for the E in or in his songs as well. And that's interesting, as this would be the decade that the Traveling Wilburys, with Bob Dylan and Tom Petty and company, would kick off their career. Later in the decade, you would really get them to see exactly how they influenced a whole new generation of musicians. So this song creates an emotional backdrop for the record, as this is Petty romanticizing wild living in Southern culture. 1 foot in the grave and 1 foot on the pedal, he says, before belting out the amazing chorus of I Was Born a Rebel. You get great vocal lift during this portion. He sounds less like he's making excuses for this type of living, and more of a declaration of this is how I'm going to live, and to hell with what you think about it. He sounds very proud to share this part of his lifestyle. Next up, It Ain't Nothing to Me. Now in here, you get more of a funky intro as the synthesizers and a Seinfeld-style bass line crank this number up. You get a great rockin', fast-paced lick from Campbell, and the horns add an element that is just so key for this number. Vibrancy, old-school Southern soul is just bursting through this number. And this effort dives into an interesting concept for a song, especially related to Southern culture. All these important happenings are occurring, right, in the lyrics. A man on the moon, smiling politicians. But Petty, and safe to assume the Southerners in his culture, in his circles, they're not that impressed about these happenings. He is concerned about dancing the night away with a loved one. And he seems very authentic with the informal speak coming through with the lyrics. Coming, smiling, it ain't nothing to me. Not a G to be found in these ones. And in this song's universe, it seems like being pretentious is a lot worse than being uninformed. And you get some really cool backing vocals that blare out the song's title throughout this number. It sounds almost like an impassioned church choir. There's very much a party atmosphere bursting at the seams of this song. Now, rocking over to the biggest hit off this album, the iconic 80s classic, Don't Come Around Here No More. You get an unbelievable drumming that sets the framework for this true classic. That cascading fill from Lynch creates a swooping sensation, especially when you listen to the song through headphones. It's very unsettling, especially when the Eastern influences on the guitar play start to pounce through. This song has no irony. It wants you to piss off. And Petty is almost menacing during certain aspects of this song. Whatever you're looking for, he says, don't come around here no more. Whoa, okay, Tom. The drums on the repeated wave add to the ominous feel of this number. A massive element of this song are the women singers. They are so important. I couldn't imagine this song without them. During the chorus, those oohs and the hays deliver an inviting yet threatening element to this track. Marilyn Martin, Stephanie Spurriel, and Sharon Solani lent their voices for this number, and we can all appreciate them to this day. Can definitely hear some influence that the Lumineers decades later would take with the shouting out of the hey during the chorus. And this song could easily be connected to ending romantic relationships, right? But also, you can look at the record's entire layout, diving into Southern culture, right? And maybe this is also connecting to just not welcoming outsiders in general. Maybe even, this is me hypothesizing, that Petty is feeling a little bit like an outsider to his own culture since he's been now in California for a little over a decade at this stage of his life. Either way that you look into it, this is a very, very dynamic song. As different parts jump out to me each time that I hear this song. Sometimes it's the drums that fill through, and that's all I'm hooked on the entire time. Sometimes it's the women singing background. Other times it's Petty's lyrics. Other times it's his ominous feel. There's so many different elements I can really grasp each time you hear it. And to me, sometimes that makes the best part of any song, is that you don't know exactly which one you'll appreciate each time you listen to it. Now, personally, I remember not quite loving this song as a kid. I thought it was a little bit slower. It wasn't quite as energetic or as fun as the other Petty numbers, especially on the Greatest Hits CD that I was exposed to. But I've definitely warmed up to it in recent years and enjoy the music, lyrics, and vocals all swarming together to create truly one of Petty's greatest songs. Next up, we're rocking over to the title track. And this shows Tom Petty. Not Tom Petty, the famous rocker or world-famous musician, but Tom Petty, the man from Gainesville, Florida. On this song, he is basically talking to you, the listener. In some ways, literally, as his voice is in a very relaxed pocket for much of this effort. Almost like these vocals were from a tape phone conversation at some points. He starts off with no words minced. There's a southern accent where I come from. And you're listening to this, okay, yeah, that's true. You get definitely a little bit of a southern drawl there, Tom. But then he serves up the most poignant line on the album. The youngins call it country. The Yankees call it dumb. Whoa. Petty delivers a pretty big incision to his vein with that line. And the delivery and line combining really struck with me for the big reason that he doesn't sound angry or flippant about this fact. More so as if he's speaking a matter-of-factly. Some people listening might assume that he is stupid just from the fact that his birth certificate says Gainesville, Florida. And that is okay, because Petty is still proud of where he came from. And then also, again, dropping out the G's in words that end with ing. So authentic when he says, I got my own way of talking and my own way of praying. And it appears he has no plans on changing or shying away from who he is and where he comes from, even after all these years as a rocker living in California. This song is still really beautiful and gripping, whether or not he is still connected to that area literally, or if he's riding onto that emotionally. And now this song is relatable, but to an extent, and I find this very interesting, as I can understand hurtful stereotypes from your home province and feeling protective of it. I'm from Southern California, and people assume a lot of things about me just off that fact. But what I cannot relate to is being from the South specifically and knowing what that judgment feels like. And I'll touch on this theme a little bit later on, but for now, just know that this song is incredibly moving, regardless of whatever it is you hail from. Next up, rocking over to Make It Better, or in parentheses, Forget About Me. So after the incredibly emotive track that just ended, you get a sound that's pretty similar to a rewind that rocks through. It's almost like a recharge from the very emotional track that we just left behind. And then you get back to a more funky musical energy. It's very akin to It Ain't Nothing to Me. The percussions, rhythmic drumming, and upbeat guitar add to the party atmosphere this number cranks up to 11. 100%. And then Petty breaks out some serious caterwauling during this effort as well. And then he also balances out his vocals with some very smooth lines throughout this effort. He is promising to make life better for his partner. And the track balances longing with celebration. Beautifully, I might add. And the backing singers were a wonderful addition to this number, adding again to the track's vibrant feel. I really can't imagine this entire record without the key influence of the backing vocals, whether it be from Petty's band or the people that they brought in outside. So important for this record. Even though this song is not entirely positive, especially when you look at the lyrics, the energy is just so infectious throughout this entire track. Next up, moving over to Spike. And we're treated here to a more down-in-the-trenches, old-school country feel. You get some greasy slides on an acoustic guitar that really set the tone for this downtrodden number. And then Petty really taps into his southern drawl for this effort vocally. You get a nice balance between sloppy and delicate, musically, lyrically, and from the storytelling. The do-do-do-do-do-do-do's hold up the back roots style that show up throughout this album, but especially on this number. Also, you get some rather simple rhymes, yet they still find a way to paint a pretty vivid picture. I think you can all think what Spike would look like, as Petty belts out the, hey, Spike, what do you like? I also like the changing references to the South that's connected to this number. as maybe not everybody is on board with how we're shaping up in the mid-'80s. As Petty says, the future ain't what it used to be. Love that line. And the song does a great job of showing where Southern rock had been and where it is going to by the time we get to the last 15 years of the 20th century. And I really enjoy this detail as well. The track ends with a literal dog panting, which is just perfect, as the next number is Dogs on the Run. Now, this is the most classic hard rock and Petty anthem on this record. Some real inviting music at the beginning, really sucks you in, and then his whines are just as intoxicating as ever. All the Petty staples are present for this song. Vivid imagery in the lyrics, the chorus that you just can't help but sing along to, and Campbell's riffs just intertwine so beautifully with Petty's vocals. Those two really did have a special connection, and I think it's criminally underrated historically. And this is probably the best song on this record that shows off those two guys' kinship. It makes sense that Campbell was actually given a writing credit for this song. And I love how Petty belts out the, yeah, and she would laugh and light my cigarettes. There's some real swagger jutting through his voice on this one. And then towards the end with Petty hollering out, like a dog, is just so scintillating. The track highlights why Petty and the Heartbreakers resonated with tens of millions of people. If you're a fan of his greatest hits CD and maybe haven't listened to this album all the way through in a while, or really familiar with Petty's hits, I recommend this song absolutely. I think you would enjoy the rockin' riff as well as Petty's incredible vocals. For decades now, people are still appreciating these types of songs from Petty's catalog. Their energy is just infectious all these years later and will be long after we're all gone. This is definitely my favorite of the high voltage efforts on this number, for sure. This is definitely the best song on this record that has Campbell really rocking the whole way through. Ultimately, songs like this are why I fell in love with Tom Petty in the first place. Cruising over to Mary's New Car. So Petty and the lads follow up with another fun, upbeat number. And bringing on another classic element of Petty songs, right? Singing about a character that you just can't help but conjure up in your head. This time it's Mary, not to be confused with Mary Jane. I'm sure those are different characters. Petty's voice is butter during this entire effort. You can almost feel the smirk percolating on his face as he delivers the lines here. Again, classic aspects of this band are just popping up like daisies throughout, making simple, repetitive lyrics still enjoyable throughout. It doesn't come off as redundant to me. More endearing, if anything. And anytime Petty mentions the radio or driving, I'm in. I think he's the best artist to drive to. If you had an hour, hour and a half, 2 hour drive, and you can only play one artist the whole way on it, who would you play? I'm definitely going with Petty, because his beats are fun enough to really keep a good move, but also they're not too intense that you would feel like you wouldn't crash into oncoming traffic, right? And this is just an incredible, incredible effort all the way through. Something about his voice, the song structure, Campbell's energy, etc., they just lead to making you want to roll down the windows and cruise down the highway, right? Maybe it's in Mary's new set of wheels, or it's your own car. Either way, you definitely want to crank up the volume and just enjoy the sun beating down when you're hearing classic tracks like this from Tom Petty and company. It's one of those efforts from Petty where just smiling is mandatory, and there's many throughout his catalog that fit that description as well. Now, going over to Southern Accent's closer is titled The Best of Everything. And it winds down in a really touching number here. Now, this track reminds me of something that maybe Billy Joel could have written. She probably works in a restaurant. Sounds very Joel-esque, especially starting off a song. Not to mention the piano play on this number really had me think of Billy Joel, but it's just mesmerizing throughout. This number drips with emotion. And yet Petty is still trying to pull out the positives of things ending with this woman, right? From no longer knowing where a girl is that he cared for, he's still very much as interested in her life. And it's some of the best combination of lyrics and vocals on this entire album. They can be found right here on this song. Petty sounds so sincere when he cries out, "Listen, honey, wherever you are tonight, I wish you the best of everything in the world. Man. But Petty is not done concocting emotions throughout the lines. He hits us with a bigger idea, and it sometimes does feel like reality, unfortunately, when he says, bad nights take forever, and the good nights don't ever seem to last. Beautiful. Sometimes that does feel true, doesn't it? And as much as Petty is renowned for his happy, upbeat tracks, like I just mentioned with the last two, he can absolutely whip up some melancholy with the best of them when he wants to. Even through his heartache, though, he truly wants what's best for this girl, even if it doesn't involve him anymore. And as he closes out the song and album with an amazing line, and honey, I hope you found whatever you were looking for. Beautiful. What an dynamite way to end a crazy, crazy good album from Tom Petty. Moving over to the categories. Crank it up to 11. So, in honor of Spinal Tap, what is the best portion of this album, ultimately? The one that makes you want to crank up the volume and just blare it in your car without a care in the world. I decided to go with the end of Dogs on the Run. And there are many excellent sequences throughout Southern Accents, 100%, don't get me wrong. But I really get a kick out of the last minute plus of that track. Petty's vocals, they just dance wonderfully with the music. And I really enjoy the more reserved songs on this record, for the most part overall. But Dogs on the Run is the best hard rockin' tune on this album, in my opinion. And this portion is just ultimately intoxicating to me. I couldn't get enough of it when I was listening to this album a ton, whether I was jumping out through song to song or listening to it all the way through in its entirety. Always stood out to me. Speaking of that, reshuffling history, going through this record and seeing which parts of the album flow very well into each other and maybe what could have been improved by changing up the record's layout. So I really enjoy how this record starts off with Rebels. That was a terrific choice. And how it ends with The Best of Everything. Those two, the start and the bookend, perfect. Couldn't have picked better songs to start and end this album. And I think they both they fit so well in relation to setting up the album and then bookending the compilation perfectly. And then you're going through the rest of it. I like how there's a couple times where you can really pair tracks together. The emotional, and then you get also with Don't Come Around Here No More with Southern Accents. Love that one connecting together. Spike with Dogs on the Run. Incredible duo. Mary's New Car with The Best of Everything I also think really flows in together as well. So I think those 6 songs all play off each other very well, and I really would want to hear them always as duos. I wouldn't necessarily want to hear a lot of these songs without hearing the other one right after it. The one change that I would make to the record's layout is I think playing Make It Better after It Ain't Nothing to Me fits the record's flow a little bit better. So I think pairing those two more funky, soulful songs back to back, especially early on in the record, would have made it a little bit more balanced overall as an album. And I do think Make It Better, it's just a little bit jarring after you hear Southern Accents, and I think the group recognized this, is you get a little bit of a pause for a couple seconds, and then you get that rewinding sound. I think they knew that, like, maybe this is a little bit of a stretch, putting this one immediately after a very emotional title track. So ultimately, I think the record's flow is good for the most part, especially with the intro and the outro. But I think that one change early on would have made the record even more balanced throughout. Reprogramming history, going through and which songs on this record have held up the best throughout time and which ones were huge in real time. So, the one massive song that would be included on Petty's impressive 1993 Greatest Hits CD was Don't Come Around Here No More. And it came attached to a really wild music video that has a lot of references to Alice in Wonderland. And it ends up with a woman dressed up as Alice turning into a cake and then getting sliced up at the end. And some people at the time were a little disturbed by the video, and MTV even sometimes played an edited version with the cake bit spliced out. But that just showed that Tom Petty was really grasping at new ways of showing music with videos at the time. Because MTV had just started in early 80s, right? And then a lot of groups were thinking of just playing basically concert footage or just recreating live aspects with the recorded song just playing through. But Petty thought that music videos could be a little bit more daring than that and challenged and had really creative ideas on where his music videos would go. And if you go through his catalogs, music videos, there are some crazy numbers out there for sure. Very creative. And he was really one of the first ones to really grasp that this doesn't need to be just a simple run-through of us playing live. Let's get creative with it. Let's get fun with it. And so, Don't Come Around Here No More was huge in real time, and it's definitely held up throughout time. It's still a song. Even though it's a little bit slower, you can still hear it on classic rock radio. And it's one of the songs that people who think of all the classic Petty songs on whether it's the greatest hit CDs or just going through his catalog, album by album, they will easily come up with Don't Come Around Here No More very early on when talking about his greatest songs. So that song carries on for sure. Rebels is a pretty popular one as well. Make It Better was also given a music video. Again, very, very interesting how that music video plays through with them climbing into the ear canal and brain of a woman and then performing inside of her body. Very interesting. There are quite a few songs on here, though, that I think deserved a little bit more pub throughout history. The title track, Dogs on the Run, Mary's New Car, and The Best of Everything, I think, are all great songs that include many classic Petty staples, and I think they're very underrated. And this just speaks to a larger point of Petty's career, honestly. His legacy is very much built up on singles and a few songs off each record. Kind of what I was talking about earlier. Even people that are pretty big fans of him may not necessarily know all of his albums or even 5 or 6 songs off each album, right? That he's definitely carried throughout history off the backs of a few massive radio songs, MTV play, singles like that would be included on the greatest hits, right? So he's a bit of a victim of his own success in that regard, as his records would sometimes get overlooked by the 1 or 2 big songs off the album. And this harkens back to my point again. He was just blending throughout the last 25 years of the 20th century when it came to rock music, very beautifully. But when you go through the rest of his catalog, you'll find some gems very easily that you will not be really burnt out of throughout time. And I think that Southern Accents is a great example of a Petty record that is not just 1 or 2 songs you've heard on the radio before. Moving over to the awards. The Pulling Teeth Award, given to the track that's the most underrated, forgotten, overlooked song on the record. In honor of Green Day's Pulling Teeth that was wedged in between Welcome to Paradise and Basket Case on Dookie. And it was just forgotten throughout history. It's very unfortunate that some of these songs, that when they're paired next to great, great iconic songs, oftentimes get overlooked. So I decided to go with The Best of Everything, as this song just drills you right in the feels. The piano play, the sentimental lyrics, the touching vocals all combine to create a truly, truly beautiful effort. And it's so touching. And it's an unbelievable send-off for Southern Accents. You really couldn't have picked I don't think you could pick a better song on this album all the way through. With the 9 songs available, that would have been a better ender. I really think this is the best that you could put as the last track off the record. And if you enjoy Petty's more intimate work, maybe like Free Fallin', you will absolutely embrace this number 100%. This Ain't Havana Award for the song that blew you away the most recent or first time you heard this record. This is in honor of the Ramones song This Ain't Havana off the End of the Century record that just completely had me gobsmacked when I heard that one all the way through. I had to get it downloaded on my iPod right away. So, the winner for this one, I think, is Southern Accents, the title track for sure. I knew I was in good hands when it started waving through my headphones, and you get to that amazing vocal sequence that I brought up before. The youngins call it country, the Yankees call it dumb. Maybe the best line on this record all the way through. And it really got to the heart of what this album is all about. The singing was vulnerable, and the lyrics were eye-opening. And while this record would show off the fun side of Petty and his musical inklings, absolutely, this song ultimately shows why this album was created. The Highway to Hell Award, best musical intro on this record. This is in honor of AC/DC's incredible riff that Angus Young created on the last record with Bon Scott. Winner for this one, I think, is Don't Come Around Here No More. So rich. The drumming just majestically cascades through your headphones, your record player, or your car stereo. And that Eastern guitar lick drops you into a very, very unique world. The few passionate hays set the framework and increases anticipation for the first 50 seconds until Petty snaps in with Don't Come Around Here No More. It is a very deliberate yet dynamic intro to a piece of music. The Lithium Award for Best Opening Line. This is in honor of the Nirvana song that starts off with "I'm so happy because today I found my friends that are in my head," off the incredible album Nevermind. Can't wait to talk about that on this show. Winner, "Honey, Don't Walk Out, I'm Too Drunk to Follow." Now, this one from Rebels gets definitely some extra credit, as not only is it an incredible opening line, but it literally starts off the record. You couldn't have found a better opening line for this one. It sets the tone for the rest of it, and honestly, it just shows that outsiders might not understand or appreciate all the elements and themes that this record dives into, but many, from the South especially, will gravitate towards happily that this record has a nice way of looking at the world, right? And also, I do enjoy bringing some sense of humor to this record as well, because there's some very emotional, genuine, and even self-serious parts of this record. So it's nice that this endeavor starts off with a little bit more of a fun, upbeat, not quite as serious line to kick off the record. Next up, the Eruption Award for Best Musical Extended Piece. No singing around for this one. And this is in honor of the Eddie Van Halen solo he created on the first record with Van Halen. Incredible stuff. Winner, Mary's New Cars solo. So the stretch in the middle of the track includes an awesome saxophone, drums, guitar, and piano piece. Really cranks up that number. And Petty's voice, right, is just such a constant throughout that there are not a lot of times throughout this record that he's not guiding you along as the album's narrator, right? There's not a ton of parts on this record that go extended solos without him singing. But this soulful play is just so tasteful, and especially throughout the middle part of this record, and I really enjoyed during this effort, the solo. It's just masterful. Really gives a fun effort with Petty being able to take a little bit of a break on the sidelines. Next up, tattoo or t-shirt. What is something from this record that would make for a nice t-shirt, or maybe even a tattoo if you're really into Tom Petty? Now, without a question, this is maybe one of the easiest ones I've ever had for this category. It's definitely the album cover. Now, I did a little history research for this one. The image is from an 1865 oil canvas painting by Winslow Homer. And the painting depicts a farmer using a scythe to hack through a wheat field, if you haven't looked at the album cover in a while. Now, it relates to the idea of America carrying on after the Civil War. Got to get back to work. And it's powerful stuff to put in relation to an album titled Southern Accents, I think. And I also want to point out a very fascinating change when you're looking at Petty's album covers. So this record contains the first cover art that did not include a shot of Tom Petty. And I find that fascinating. I believe it is related to the album holding concepts, ideas, and themes that are more significant than just Petty, his band, or his music. As this is about his heritage, his roots, and wrestling with his own culture, right? But I also find it just fascinating that this record is as personal and as significant as anything Petty would do up to that point of his career. I find that dichotomy noteworthy, honestly. A look into Tom Petty the person by using the history of the American South as the vessel. Remarkable. Moving over to Nobody's Perfect. So I hinted at this a little bit during Reshuffling History, but the one song I feel that you don't necessarily need on this record, or at least where it's placed, is Make It Better. Now, that is not to say that it's a bad song. I just enjoy the flow on the songs on this record, and I don't quite believe it fits right after the title track. I believe it is better suited for, if you would put it between It Ain't Nothing to Me and Don't Come Around Here No More. As the more intimate songs on this album and the two more straightforward Petty feel-good rockers towards the end of the record are just seamlessly meshed together so well. Again, I used the word jarring earlier. It is a little bit having this song come up right after the emotional touching of Southern Accents. Make It Better is an interesting tune, 100%. I enjoy it. But I feel like its placement in the album could have improved the flow with a slight change. And I did this, actually. I went through and I changed up the order of the record a little bit. And I enjoyed the song much more when I changed it up, though. Changed up the order. I just didn't feel like it was handling the baggage of the track's emotion from Southern Accents. And I enjoyed it much more. Now, going over to Almost Famous. Now, this is a piece that I write showing why modern music fans should ultimately care about this band and record today. Think of this as a submission to Rolling Stone. And this is titled The Man Behind the Voice. When I planned out the concept of this show, I was really excited about the idea of exploring the different eras of my favorite musicians. The context is endlessly fascinating to me. I enjoyed showing the unique aspects of Dylan's electric record and Green Day's major label debut on this show. I'll have a great time discussing the different eras of the Ramones, comparing AC/DC's two lead singers. But my task for Tom Petty today was a bit different. So I picked the albums I discuss in this program due to their release date, in case you haven't figured that out yet. I talk about records celebrating an anniversary divisible by 10 within the last calendar year. That gives me time to talk about the records that I really want to dive into on this show. And so I selected Southern Accents because it was a Tom Petty record hitting its 40th anniversary. It was as simple as that. Whereas the other albums I've done so far were chosen in large part due to the specific material on the album, as well as my affiliation for the band. The name and release year was all I needed to dive into Tom Petty today. And as hinted on before, that makes sense when discussing the discography of Tom Petty. He is not defined by an album, an era, or one song. To me, he encapsulates rock music for the last 25 years of the 20th century. Think of all the fads in art, music, fashion, politics, and culture that came and went from the mid-70s through 1999. And over all that change, Tom Petty was still cranking out infectious material the world could not wait to embrace. Even during solo projects, he still had to have a Heartbreaker tie-in, as Mike Campbell was his right-hand man. His solo work was not easy to disassociate from the Heartbreakers catalog. I cannot wait to discuss a ton of Petty records on the show, including his major label debut, Full Moon Fever, Into the Great Wide Open. I often break down why a band's specific record is important today. But really, there are at least 10 Petty albums I would gladly dedicate full episodes to, in a heartbeat. His catalog is full of incredible music I have no doubt you would enjoy, and it will always hold value to me, as he is one of the premier musicians in American history. Having said all that, getting back to the specific episode, this is about Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers Southern Accents. So I wanted to see why this specific record holds up and stands out amongst the amazing albums on Petty's resume. His lyrics have such a way of breaking down the barrier of performer and listener. His songs are so relatable and easy to grasp. I often felt like he penned them while sitting across from me at my own kitchen table. Because Petty was such an effective writer, I often pictured myself as the man singing his own lyrics. Petty was the vessel to convey my own feelings. I was serenading my future wife with Here Comes My Girl. I just happened to be borrowing his voice for the date. I was the one answering the bell during I Won't Back Down. Petty was the one who came up with the scenario. I was the one learning to fly. Tom Petty was looking for his own set of wings. Then when it comes to his character-driven songs, I was often more caught up in the story than the storyteller. Eddie with his leather jacket and chains that would jingle, and Mary Jane, who just had to put on her party dress, had my attention. Not necessarily Tom Petty himself. It is akin to seeing Sam Jackson belt out Quentin Tarantino dialogue. You get so caught up in the story, the man behind the material is not always the focal point. Anybody who has ever put on a hoodie and gotten psyched out to Eminem spitting Mom Spaghetti and Lose Yourself can understand this dynamic. That track was written by Marshall Mathers about his own life, but anyone who has ever faced any adversity can just as easily slide into that song as the main character. Until diving into Southern Accents for this episode, I always pictured myself inside Petty's songs when he sings out, I relate to his songs back to something in my own life, while Petty holds court as the reliable narrator. I do not imagine Petty in a free fall or running down a dream. His songs come back to me, at least most of the time anyway. But when it comes to Southern Accents, especially the painfully personal songs like Rebels, the title track, and Don't Come Around Here No More, I do not put myself inside Petty's guitar strap. Instead, I see him sitting across from me at a table, explaining his Southern heritage to me while drinking sweet tea. And I do not envision Tom Petty, the larger-than-life rock and roll Hall of Famer who sold tens of millions of records and is one of the most iconic artists in the history of American music. No. I imagine the conversation with Thomas Earl Petty from Gainesville, Florida, who is proud to be from the South and loves Elvis. This record is critical in understanding Tom Petty. Not the musician, Tom Petty the person. There's so many themes on this record that I find relatable, such as having a tug-of-war relationship with your home area. But this entire album is not to be identifiable to everybody. And ultimately, that is the point. It was written by a man from Florida who was born less than 100 years after the Civil War ended. This record offers insight into the personality traits and feelings that come along with being from a place some people automatically equate as a negative. When I heard the glass-cutting line of, "The Yankees call it dumb," it really hit me about what this record is all about. Even after all the success and accolades Petty had received nearly a decade into his career at that point, he still felt like a bit of an outsider to a portion of the music industry. Listening to this album, I did less fantasizing about putting myself inside the songs and more about putting myself into Tom Petty's shoes. This album lives on as an intimate one-way dialogue with one of the greatest Southern rockers America has ever had the pleasure of calling their own. While so much of his material is supposed to put the listener or the character as the center of attention, Southern Accents is an in-depth look at how Petty viewed his Southern heritage in relation to how his fans viewed him. I thoroughly enjoyed spending time with an introspective Tom Petty. And while this record was not packed to the gills with insane guitar riffs or hard rock and anthems, Southern Accents lives on as a document that offers insight into how Petty viewed himself, his roots, his fans, his music, and ultimately, his legacy. And that does it for this episode of Don't Scratch the Vinyl. So now just a few housekeeping items before I sign off. Please follow the show on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at DSTV Pod. Facebook page is Don't Scratch the Vinyl Podcast. I have clips up and will be continuing to add additional content to those channels as long as I am producing the show. So, I have some exciting news to tell you about. I will be a credential media member for this year's Odyssey's K-Rock Almost Acoustic Christmas. I'm very excited to be there because on this podcast, I've said many times my affiliation for K-Rock and this specific event. I plan to get great content centered around the bands performing at the Kia Forum, Saturday, December 13th. That includes the All-American Rejects, Rise Against, Social Distortion, and many others. Hopefully I get to have some great conversations with some K-Rock hosts as well. So I'll recap my time with the 34th rendition of the Southern California Classic, which is a December tradition that you read about, on my next episode. So speaking of my next episode, it will be talking about Green Day's American Idiot, and I'm very excited that that record will be fully analyzed on this show, as it was really the album that inspired me to do this show in the first place. Now I'll be recording that episode sometime in the next couple of weeks. I'll make sure to get that done before New Year's. Thanks again for listening. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you got something out of this show if you were a longtime fan of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, or maybe you didn't know much about them before listening. Share along with friends and family. Every little bit helps as I continue to grow and refine this program. I just hope I did the story justice, as I know Tom Petty means so much to a countless number of people. And I really enjoyed going through his first 6 records and marinating with Southern Accents, especially. So thanks again for hanging out and listening to me ramble about one of the best bands America has ever produced, and one of my personal favorites. And remember this, please, above all else, if you take one thing from the show, remember, you rock, and don't let anyone ever tell you different. That was a good one.